Right, this iPhone 4 has got a problem with the screen. Now the screen's been replaced by someone, but it's been sent back and it isn't working. So I'm going to try turning it on and we'll just see what happens. Hopefully you can see it's not really behaving how it should. Let's just see how far it gets. So it's obviously the LCD is a problem. Now it might be when we get it opened up that it's actually just a cable that's snagged or something like that, but I'm guessing looking at that it's the actual screen display that's the problem. Right, okay, so the first thing we need to do is to get the back off the phone. So 2 screws at the bottom. And I've got a screw chart with the position of all the screws, so I know where they've come from, because they're all different sizes in this phone, so it's a good idea to keep a good record of where you've got the screws from, so when you come to put it back together you know they're all in the correct place. Right, so the first bit that we start on is the battery connection just down here, and this is the first bit of the phone that we take out. So we've got one posi screw just there, so we take that out, and then this metal area here just lifts straight upwards. So I usually get it just by this corner point here, and you can either use like a plastic tool like this one, or you can use your fingernail depending on if you can do it that way. It isn't really a good idea to use anything metal, because if you bridge the contacts on the battery you can get a bit of a spark, and I'm not really sure if that would damage the phone, so I steer clear of doing that. So I just get my finger under that corner and lift upwards like that. And that little connector there, that cover plate, goes between the battery and the board. So we'll take that out and then use this clear tab here and pull upwards, and that should lift the battery out. So this shouldn't be too hard to get out because somebody else has already had a go at this, but if they've never been opened before it can take quite a bit of effort to lift it out. So that if you're having to do it like for the first time, it is really just really gently pull it and do it quite a few times. Don't just try and get it out in one go, because all that will happen, you'll snap this plastic lifting tab just here, and then you'll have to try and get something underneath it to lift it up, which you don't really want to prise against any of these components, and it isn't really a good idea to prise against this side. So I always try and use that, but just do it gently and eventually it will come out. Right, so the next bit is the charger port, which is this area here, and again there's 2 screws that hold this in. I'll put them in the correct position. That's the little plate that covers the block connector. And again with this one I wouldn't use anything metal, either a fingernail or a plastic tool, and I just grab it from this side and lift upwards, and it should just lift out of the block on the board. And again, usually this is glued down, so it does take a little bit of effort when you're doing it for the first time, so I would just usually really gently pull it upwards, and then at the bottom here just fold it outwards so it's out of the way. Right, next area is this plate up here, which that's your Wi-Fi antenna plate. So this screw here, and then there should actually be a screw here, but it's not there, it's missing. And that screw would normally be, it's quite a long screw that fits in there. It'd probably be, let's have a look, probably something similar to that kind of a length, which is a lot different to any of the other screws. The only one that's like that on this phone is the one that holds the buzzer in place, which I'll show you in a little while. and that the one on the buzzer is actually slightly longer than the Wi-Fi one, so you know the difference. So when I put the phone back together, I'll put a screw back in there, because otherwise the Wi-Fi reception won't work. So that's all the screws off that plate. So the next thing is to get that out. Now usually it is a bit tighter than this. Again, it's because somebody's had a go at it already, that's why it's the way it is. So you just usually push backwards and it should just lift out. And there's two little spikes on it that are just here and here. And on the inside of the phone there's actually two little slots where those prongs fit into. So when you're putting it back in, you sort of make sure that those are in position when you push it up. Right, next we've got all these block connectors here, and then there's the two screen connectors just here. So just gently on this one, slotted screwdriver or plastic tool, but I find the plastic tool is just a little bit too clumsy for doing this, so I prefer to use a screwdriver. So obviously on this screen connection there's some tape or something been added on here. I don't know why that's there. So this is the digitizer connection, which is a very floppy type cable, and this is the LCD, which is a lot more firm. So we'll just fold those back out of the way. Now we've got a slotted screw, which is just here. This is the only slotted screw on this motherboard, so it's very easy to remember where that came from. So unscrew that, lift out. Okay. Next, there would normally be a little white circle on top of this screw, but obviously because somebody's worked on it already, they've not bothered covering that back up. So that one comes out. And we've just got a little one left at the bottom here. But before I take that out, I'm just going to disconnect the signal connector, which is this one here. Now, I always prize this from this side, because on the opposite side, down here, there's a very small blue inductor which actually amplifies the signal as it comes into the phone. So if you were to try and do it from this side, there's a possibility that you might just knock that, and it's very easy to knock off and not very easy to put back on. So it's a lot easier and safer to just come from this side, and then you don't cause that damage in the first place. So now we've got that off, we'll remove this screw. That's all the fixings out. So the only thing left holding that in now is the SIM card. So we'll just get that out of the way. And then to get this out, we'll just try and bend these little connectors back a little bit so they don't get in the way. And we start at the bottom, just try and get a hold of it either side. Just lift it slightly, and then just manoeuvre it really gently so it lifts out past those connectors. Once you've got it out, just really gently put it down somewhere nice and dry so it's out of the way. Right, the last bit that we're going to need to remove now is this speaker assembly down here, and this is just held in by one screw in this corner now. So just release that screw, and then this just lifts up, pulls out. Right, one last thing we've got in is this buzzer here, which that's like the vibrator that goes when you switch it onto silent or mute or when the phone rings. So two very different size screws on this. This first one's very long. Just put that in the right position on the screw chart, and the one on the right is very short, so it's easy to remember which one's which. and again that just lifts straight up. Right, now this is where you really do need to have a magnetic screwdriver, because the screws that hold the screen in are really small and they're quite hard to get at, so you need to be able to sort of get in with something that's going to keep hold of the screw for you. So there's one here, take that now. It has been kinked just on the digitizer cable there, that'll have happened when it's being fed through the frame, because it is a really difficult thing to do, to feed it through the frame. And it does look a little bit like there's a bit of damage just here, but it's hard to say really if that's the exact cause. So we will try with a new screen. And funnily enough, this has actually been put on the wrong way around as well. It should be the other way up. This little gauze that sort of covers where the speaker is. So yeah, we'll prepare it ready for the new screen to go in. One thing I always do now as well, just here, this is a proximity sensor just here, and this senses the light change at the front when you put the phone to your ear, which that's what causes the screen to go blank so you don't press the buttons by accident. Now what happens sometimes when you change the screen, the fit of it isn't quite the same as the original, and that means that the screen doesn't fit tight against here, so there's a slight gap which allows light from the bottom, the back of the screen just here, to travel upwards. Now that causes a problem in that when you block the light from the front, there's still actually light coming up from the screen underneath, and because it can still see that light, it doesn't realise that there's no light coming from the front, so it doesn't knock the screen off. So what I normally do, I attach a bit of tape to the underside here, just between where that gauze is and where the sensor is, and it just builds up the layer from this frame to where the back of the screen is, which prevents the light being able to transmit up and stops the sensor being sort of interfered with the light from the screen, so it just notices the front. And I've found that that works. Just 9 times out of 10 that'll sort the problem out, because it does happen a lot. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like after I've done it, and then we'll put the screen on. Right, okay, this is the area just here where the sensors are, and all I've done, I've just put some tape around the sides, underneath, and actually in between them, and that means when the screen gets pushed down onto there, it's more likely to be tight against where that tape is, which means any light coming from underneath can't pass through. So the only light that that sensor can see is the light that's coming from actually outside, which that's how it's meant to be. So when it senses that there isn't any light there anymore, it realises that it's against your ear, and therefore shuts the screen off, so you don't press the buttons accidentally when you're on a call. So hopefully that will mean it won't function incorrectly, and it will shut off as it's meant to. Right. Right, so here's my new screen. Get these off eBay. This one isn't the cheapest screen you can get. You can get them cheaper than where I get them from, but where I get them from, they nearly always work, and they're good quality. So I'm sort of prepared to pay a little bit more because I know that I'm going to get the right product. So on the back, these are the cables that we have to feed through the frame, which is a little bit tricky. You've got to take your time with it. This is your LCD, and this one's a digitizer. And what we have to do is feed them through this slot here. So I'm going to try and do that now. And what we need to do is just sort of go sideways like that to get that through. Get those metal bits through. Always try and be quite gentle. And then what we need to keep an eye on is this area here, because when we're feeding it through, this top cable just has a little loop on it there, and what happens if you just push it straight in, that catches on the metal and it forces that kink in it that I showed you earlier on the other screen that had been fitted. So you just need to give it a little slight push down like that, and it will find its way through that hole. And now you can just see it's going to go through there without a problem. Okay. Right, so I've got this down now. What you should see on the inside, you should be able to see this little flap here, which that's the area that wants to snag when you're feeding it through. Now if you can't quite see that after you've got it through, then you've probably caught it, and before you fix it I'd suggest looking and making sure that you haven't sort of damaged it in any way. You'll just see on these cables there's like a little dotted line, and that's where it should fold against the frame here and then come upwards. So you just sort of give it a little push so it wants to bend there, and then push it down, and that should keep it in roughly the right place for when you start putting everything back together. Okay, so I'm just going to tighten up those screws with the washers on to start with. So start at one end, just apply a bit of pressure to the front of the screen so that it forces itself inwards and makes it a nice tight fit. So 3 on this side. Okay, and that one there. Just check that. Yep. And 3 on this side. So again, just push it into the frame as you tighten it. Now these will hold it in place for you to be able to get the really small, and you can just see actually one of these has must have just done it slightly too much. So just going to get that wash on the end of it. It's just so much more tricky to do this than it is to just tighten them straight back up, you know. So, but you obviously do have to slacken them a bit, otherwise the screen won't slide in nicely when you're trying to fit it. But you can spend like 5 minutes messing around with this trying to get it in. So I've got the washer and the screw there, and I've just got to get it into this. Luckily enough, first time, but it's a lot easier just to be able to tighten it straight back up. So that soles one's done. Then we've got the 4 that are in the corners. So 1 here, and again I usually put it on a nice clean surface. Make sure there's no bits of glass or anything like that if you've had a cracked screen. And then just apply a bit of pressure downwards as you're doing this, and it'll just mean that you get a nice clean finish when it's all sort of tightened up. So 1, 2. Now when the phone came to me, there was actually a bag with a few screws in, and there was one of these short when I was taking the phone apart. So I'm just going to have a quick look what's in here. Well, I can see the Wi-Fi one straight away. Let me just have a look at these. I think it's that one. So down to the bottom. There we go. Okay, that one's in. So I know that one's definitely the Wi-Fi, so I'll put that in the right place on the screw chart. It's just this one here now. Once that's tightened up, just flick it over. Just see if it looks okay. That one looks alright. I'm just going to check the home button. That feels fine. So I'm going to put this back on so it doesn't get scratched. Okay. So the first bit that goes back in is a speaker assembly. Just pick that up off here. That's the magnet and that's actually grabbed on the screw. So when you're pushing this back in, these little fingers here have to lock in behind this part of the frame. So just as you're pushing it down, you just need to get something to ensure that they are actually behind and not on top, because that affects your Wi-Fi signal as well. So screw that bit down, and then we're ready to put the motherboard back in. So I'll just get that a bit out of the way. And these back just a little bit. And there should be a little rubber strip on the end of here, and that's there just so when you push it up tight against those cables it doesn't nick them. Now I've actually got one of these in a box here, so I'm going to stick that on. Okay, it's just a bit of rubber with a little groove in it, nothing fancy, just like that. And that just protects those cables when you're pushing up against them. So just make sure it's nice and clean. Get that out of the way. So drop it in from the top like that. You just got to keep an eye on where the screw position is, so it's roughly like there. It does need to sit down a little bit, and then you just need to sort of budge this little connector out of the way as you're coming down. Push upwards. And there is actually two little pins that locate when you're putting the board in. I'll just show you those now. You can see one of them. It's just around here. There's a little tiny hole. And there's a pin, and if you've pushed it up and it's in the right place, then that pin will locate on the hole. Okay, so first screw to put in is the one that would normally be covered with a white dot, which is that one. And next we'll put the slot one in. I will actually, before I put that in, I'll clip these connectors down just so if you do slip it all with a screwdriver, you're a lot less likely to do any damage to the connectors because they're covered up by these block connector tops. It is quite easy to slip with a slotted screw. That goes just in this corner here. Okay, and then we'll put the one that goes at the bottom in, which is this one. Okay, just going to put this is your charger port connection here. We'll put that plate on. Okay, so I've taken one out of an old broken iPhone that works, and that's the difference. That's the one that'll work with the silver metal bit on the bottom still, just that little tiny bit of metal there, and that's the one that won't work. It's just got a bit of plastic and that's all, so it won't pick up the Wi-Fi, not like it should. Okay. So locate that at the back, just make sure they're all down, and you just have to push into those two slots. So the first one I put in is always the Wi-Fi one, the real one then, and that goes right in the middle at the top. It can be a bit awkward to get in this sometimes because it's such a long screw. There we go. Okay, and come to the side. This one goes into the top of the slotted screw that we put in earlier on. And inside the camera. Just underneath there. Now this one, you've really not got to tighten this too much because the hole that it goes into is just lightly soldered onto the motherboard and they come loose really easy. So just tighten it a little amount, don't go over the top. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put I'll just put this antenna connector on first. Now these are quite awkward to get on sometimes as well. Not in this case. And then this is the connector that should go underneath the battery. This just holds down the antenna connection and also grounds to the back of the iPhone. And then the battery pushes up against that, just like that, and then clips down into the connector, like that. Screw in there, and then that just leaves us with the vibrate buzzer to put in at the top corner. And we're ready to see if it all works. Fingers crossed. So a long one on the left, and a really short one on the right. Okay, now what I'll do, the little white tab that goes over the top of the screw, I'm going to try the phone first to make sure that it works. These are little white sticky tabs just here, because there's no point in me putting it in if I actually have to take something back out again to make sure that it works. So okay, now that looks like it's firing up a bit better than it was before. So let's just hope it fires up properly. Now hopefully this won't have a passcode on it because I haven't been given the passcode if it has, so I can't go any further than just testing whether it functions. Normally you'd want to test the camera and the Wi-Fi and obviously the sensors up here to check to see whether you can make a call and it cuts it off. Passcode. But we can check to see lock button, home button's working, digitizer's working. and it actually does look like it's connecting to some Wi-Fi there, although it won't be mine, it's probably a BT one or something, so we know the Wi-Fi is working. So the only real thing extra that we need to check would be the camera and the sensor for making calls. Yeah, so good. Okay, thanks.